Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I'm going to be starting this presentation, inshallah, on the marital relationship and its impact on children. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربنا زدنا علما. So this presentation is focusing on the marital relationship, and particularly when there is conflict in the relationship. And it's so important for us to keep this in mind because we don't always realize and recognize the impact that it has on children. We tend to focus on the couple and, okay, they need to work things out, they need to go to marriage counseling, but we don't always think about the impact on children. And so this presentation focuses on that, and we'll go into some detail. So a bit of background when it comes to marriage in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, and we know these ayat, that your spouses are a garment for you, and you are a garment for them. And he also tells us that it is he who created you from a single soul and made its mate of like nature in order that you might dwell with him or her in love and compassion. So this reminds us really the basis of where our marriage is supposed to be. And so many times, I myself as a therapist, and I primarily work with couples. I do work with individuals, couples, and families. But so many times when I'm with my couples, they believe that this is impossible, that this is something that they can never get to. And so it really is essential for us to get back to this, that this is the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes our relationships to be, that we are a garment for each other with comfort and care and love and compassion, and that we take care of each other. And so it really is about having that focus in mind and striving to get back to that. And so it's essential that we recognize when there is a problem, when things are away from this love and compassion, when there are arguments, when there's distress, when there's conflict, when we're avoiding each other. And this is when we can recognize that, okay, this is a problem. This is something that we really need to figure out, and we need to get the help for. So the couple relationship is the foundation of the building called family. And this is why it is so important for that marriage to be strong. So many times I have parents who come in, and they come in with issues with their children. My son isn't listening to me. My daughter's having issues, with her friends, or there's something going on. And oftentimes I will, meet with them. I'll definitely meet with their child and, talk to them and see what's going on. And a lot of times it goes back to the couple. It goes back to the husband and wife and how their bond is fragile. There's something going on with them. They're arguing, they're not on the same page, and that's impacting the children. So it is essential for the foundation of the family to be strong, to be healthy, for the entire building, for the entire family to be strong, for the children to be secure, well-rounded, and ready for success. Another thing I want us to keep in mind is oftentimes we're so afraid of this word divorce. We're afraid of what it means, and definitely, for good reasons. It's not easy, it's a difficult thing. But we don't think about the hardships and the negative effects of a tumultuous marriage, or a marriage in which there is high conflict. And so empirical evidence suggests that children are actually harmed less by the elements of a divorce than the discord between dysfunctional parents. So keeping this in mind, it really needs to be a focus where we look at marriages and how, if they are dysfunctional, if they are not providing this healthy environment for the children, that they're being impacted. The children are facing such negative effects. And so our focus needs to shift. So a low conflict environment is crucial to the healthy growth of a child. That they're given that space to feel safe, to feel understood and comforted, and a place where they can thrive and flourish. So when is parental conflict or conflict in the marriage, when is it harmful? Because later on I will talk about how it's necessary, right? Conflict is always going to be there, but there's healthy conflict and there's unhealthy. So let's focus on unhealthy and when it is harmful, especially to the children. So parental conflict is harmful to the children when it's frequent, when it is heated and hostile, involving verbal insults and raised voices. So I want all of us to get a picture here. It's not just conflict. It's not just arguing, because again, I tell all my couples as well, arguing, bickering, disagreeing, all that is healthy in a relationship. But when does it become unhealthy? And this is when it is frequent, when it is occurring more often than usual. And frequent really depends on the couple. It's about knowing yourself as a couple and what is out of the norm and what is normal for you as a couple. And then when it is heated and hostile. And so get a picture of what's hostile in your mind. It includes verbal insults and then, loud voices. It starts to get messy. And also when parents become physically aggressive with one another, when they withdraw from an argument or give each other the silent treatment, which isn't something that we often think could be a negative or could have detrimental effects on children. We see this often, maybe in our own relationships or in others that we know. But the silent treatment, not speaking to each other. There's this tension in the air, and children, they're very perceptive. They really are that kind of wet cement. They really absorb everything that's happening around them. So they feel that tension. They sense that tension. So even if there's silence, there's not arguing, there's not this loud yelling at each other, but there's that silence, there's that tension in the air, and the child's going to feel it. So also when the conflict seems to threaten the intactness of the family, there's threats going on. I'm going to leave. Somebody leaves and slams a door. These kinds of things. And also, of course, when it's about the child. And this can have even more damaging effects that I'll discuss a bit later on. When the argument is, for example, hostile, heated, and it's about the child as well. So more on the marital conflict. The relationships children have with their caregivers play critical roles in regulating stress hormone production during the early years of life. So the relationship, this is the most important thing, the relationship that a child has with his or her parent, right? Or his or her parents. This is essential. There needs to be that kind of comfortable bond, right? This secure attachment that I'll mention a little bit more detail later on. And so it not only is for them to feel secure, but it regulates the stress hormone production. And so when that is, when it is shaky, when it is not on strong footing, the child has an increase in the stress hormone, especially in those early years of life when their brain is developing and they're growing and they're maturing. The slightest hint of aggression or hostility sparks a sharp increase in the cortisol levels, so the stress hormone, and cardiac stress in children. This is serious stuff. So this is a slightest hint of aggression or hostility. So we're not at the complete arguing yet. We're not at the, all out fighting yet. This is the slightest hint of aggression or hostility. This comes from a lot of research, a lot of studies. So it increases the stress hormone and cardiac stress in the child. And these are some examples of where children exhibit the same stress reaction. When they yell at each other, when their parents are yelling at each other, they're contemptuous with each other, calling each other names, rolling eyes. This is something that, was a bit surprising for me. This is something that, it might not seem like a big deal, but even the rolling of the eyes and yelling at each other, they kind of exhibit the same stress reaction. Giving out an exasperated sigh, avoiding their partner. So again, that kind of goes back to that silent treatment where there is a lack or a decrease in lack of interaction between each other. And when they use intimidation, they're pointing a finger at their partner or they're glaring at them. So this really is serious in that children, they may not even show it on the outside. We may not even see it. And I will go through some of the reactions that children have, but they may not have that outer reaction at all, and everything's happening on the inside. This is for us to reflect on, to really think about, when those arguments arise, is that the child is feeling it. They're feeling the negative effects of it. They're feeling stressed out. There's a fear that arises that something could happen, somebody could leave, somebody's going to get hurt. There's so much that comes about that brings about that cardiac stress and the increase in the stress hormone. So what does that increase in stress do? Like, why is that such a bad thing? And so it actually disrupts the architecture of the developing brain. And this is particularly, in the youngest of children, right? Even as young as 6 months, studies have shown that they show the increase in the stress and distress when their parents are fighting. So their brain is still developing. So this is having such a negative impact on the brain. Healthy development can be derailed by excessive or prolonged activation of stress response systems in the body and the brain. So again, the developing brain, it's still developing. It's not at that stage, and it needs that calmness. That increase in the stress hormone has a negative impact on the brain. Sustained activation of the stress response system can lead to, so this increase in stress, it leads to impairments in learning, memory, and the ability to regulate stress responses. So it's not only a behavioral thing. It's not only that, they'll cry or they'll feel stressed out or they'll worry, but this has a huge impact on their ability to learn, on their ability to remember things, on their ability to regulate themselves, to calm themselves. So this kind of puts them at a disadvantage of not being able to, control anger outbursts, or not being able to, excel in school. There's so many things that we can think about as a child is growing, the impact that this has on the child. So we talked about the brain. So this is mental and physical health that is impacted by parents' conflict. The child perceptions of parent marital quality directly predict mental health indicators: anxiety, depression, internalizing behaviors. So there's a lot of mental health issues that can arise because a child has been exposed to this, their parents arguing and fighting. So the marital conflict is related to overall child health, digestive problems, fatigue, and chronic illness. So mental and physical health is impacted. And when it comes to teens, specifically, there's the substance abuse, sexual activity, their religious activity is affected, and their education as well is negatively impacted. More impact on children. If that wasn't enough, there's so much research on this topic, and I think we don't talk about it enough. It's so important for us to look at the child when parents are not getting along, when parents are arguing and they're delaying, seeking that help. I think it's important to kind of think about, what is the impact on my child? I may be dealing with this. I may be handling this, dealing with it in whatever way, but what is the impact on my child? So from a very early age, as young as 6 months, children show distress when their parents fight. So these are some of the things children exhibit: fear, anger, anxiety, sadness. Health problems disturb sleep, difficulty in focusing and succeeding at school. And beyond that, they externalize and internalize. So the externalize is what they're showing on the outside. So children may become aggressive, hostile, antisocial. It really does impair their ability to interact with other children, to interact with adults, and they may engage in non-compliant behavior, delinquency, vandalism, etc. And a lot of that is definitely the older children. And how do they internalize it? And this is something that we don't see on the outside. It's everything that's happening inside, that they are internalizing it. They may, blame themselves. They have that fear, right? That fear has a huge impact on the way that they're feeling, the way that they go about in their day-to-day living. So it can show up in depression, anxiety, withdrawal from others, like complete withdrawal. A lot of times children have to do this to kind of self-soothe. There's so much conflict that's occurring in their environment, in this place that is supposed to be a safe, healthy, nurturing environment. And so when it's full of hostility, they withdraw into themselves to self-soothe, to take care of themselves. So children from high conflict homes are more likely to have poor interpersonal skills, poor problem-solving abilities, and poor social competence. So even the ability to problem solve in day-to-day issues, and let alone in their education. And this is where I mentioned children can come to blame themselves. Their parents are fighting, especially if they're fighting about them. And oftentimes that's where parents, they fight and they feel that they can fight, and argue in front of the child because it's about them. And one parent may feel, oh, well, I'm advocating for the child, but that arguing is occurring in front of the child. So it's not sending that positive message to the young child at all. So they can come to blame themselves or find harmful ways of coping. Children experience physiological reactions. There's so much of that, like the heart rate increasing, the sweating, the severe stress reactions. And this goes back to what we're discussing about harming their brain development. So there's something called the spillover effect, and it really is about parents in high conflict relationships. They actually tend to be worse parents in the sense that they engage in more criticism, aggression, making threats, shouting, and hitting. So it increases, right? It spills over not only from the marital relationship, but into their parenting. And so they may become inconsistent in their parenting. They're going through too much in their marriage to really focus and nurture and take care of their children. So this is where children may fail to form that secure attachment that is so essential, to feel that sense of a secure bond, a loving attachment to their caregiver, which really provides for a healthy sense of self as they move forward into their teenage years, into their adult years. And this is where it can have an impact on their future relationships, that children perceive themselves and their social worlds more negatively, and they have more negative pictures of family relationships. They have a negative picture of what a husband-wife relationship is supposed to be. And so they can carry this into their teen years, into their adulthood, and they may take that into their own relationships. So it's not just a fight or an argument or a hostile situation in the moment, but it has such a ripple effect into the future that it's affecting that individual child and so many others who will come in contact with him or her. And different children have different effects. It's not always that even siblings in the same family can have different effects, and you don't always know why, but there are some variables. The age, gender, temperament, coping strategies, their reactions, their physiological reactions to stress, the family characteristics that they're in, maybe their sibling relationships, maybe they have a really close sibling relationship, and that gets them through the difficulty of their parents' conflictual relationship. Their attachment to parents, the parents' mental health and substance use, and definitely socioeconomic pressure. But we know from research and studies that children are vulnerable to the impact of a high conflict home, regardless of the socioeconomic status. So that's just an extra variable or an extra factor. But really, it is about the high conflict within the home has serious negative implications when it comes to the child. So then we move into, so now we understand that. We understand that there are so many, the specific ways, right? The specific ways that this negative, unhealthy conflict can manifest, right? We have examples of them, even rolling the eyes, silent treatment, etc. And we have details on how the child is affected and what is the negative impact that can, take place within the child, internally, externally, how they internalize things and how they will show things on the outside, the negative behavior, etc. So what is healthy conflict? Because we know that not all marital conflict is bad. So while destructive conflict between parents has long-lasting negative effects on children, if handled constructively, children cultivate a sense of security and view conflict in a positive light. So this is essential because it's not about the conflict. It's about how the conflict manifests and how it is handled. Is it healthy or unhealthy? And it's important for children to see this, even to have, I tell my couples, whenever you're going to argue behind closed doors. This way your child doesn't hear the arguments and they don't hear, what's going on. But it's also important here and there to exhibit and to model this healthy conflict that, okay, mom and I are disagreeing, and we're going to sit down and discuss it, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to come to a conclusion. So this also shows children that, hey, it doesn't mean that we have to agree all the time and everybody has to be happy all the time. But when there is a disagreement, when there is something that people aren't coming to an agreement on, we can sit down and figure it out. So as disagreement arises between parents, conflict can be grounds for vital teaching moments that give children the confidence to resolve conflict positively. And this really does teach them how to resolve conflict in their own lives, with their friends, with their peers, etc. So that's important. And this kind of reiterates the same thing, that children who witness the unhealthy communication, they don't really know what a healthy relationship looks like. But when they witness the marital conflict that's resolved with warmth and empathy, then they're able to manage their own stress, then they're able to resolve conflict in their lives. So healthy couples bring about healthy families. And that really should be the focus on, yes, we want to make our families better, we want to improve, but we also, the main focus, the foundation are the couples. And so Dr. John Gottman, he is an expert on couples, done decades and decades of research about couples. He talks about how the successful marriages have a higher ratio of positivity versus negativity. So it's basically a 5-to-1 ratio. So for every negative statement or negative comment, there's 5 positive comments. And in this book, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, I work on this book with my couples. I recommend it to them. I definitely recommend it to all couples, even those who are, about to get married. He discusses these 7 ways of making the marriage work. There's quizzes that you can take within the book. So basically, it's enhancing the love maps, meaning knowing about each other, nurturing that fondness and admiration. And subhanAllah, our deen talks so much about this, and how when you are grateful, right, when you have that gratitude, and gratitude really being that foundation in a relationship, you can increase in that fondness and admiration and really appreciate each other. And when that appreciation is there, then you're able to turn towards each other instead of away from each other. And you're able to let your partner influence you. If you appreciate your partner and you respect your partner, your spouse, then you're you're more willing to let them influence you and give you their opinion on certain things. And then the 5 and 6, he talks about solving your solvable problems and then overcoming gridlock when there's a problem that just won't be solved. And that's where a lot of couples go wrong, is they don't realize that there are problems that will never be solved. There's going to be something that the two of you argue about that just will not be solved. And once you recognize that this is something that won't be solved, we can agree to disagree, then you will move beyond fighting over that same issue over and over and over again. And then the last one being create shared meaning. And subhanAllah, as Muslims, that's a great place to start for us, is that shared meaning as a believing couple, as Muslims, that you are a team against shaitan and a team against all that shaitan throws at your marriage. So creating that shared meaning together. And this is his Sound Relationship House, again from Gottman. And it's basically the same thing, but I wanted to focus on the manage conflict part, where he says that when you are managing conflict, you're going to do these 3 things. When you're managing conflict in a healthy way, because this is the Sound Relationship House. This is everything that's healthy about your relationship. So you're going to accept your partner's influence. And that's where we go wrong as couples. We have that ego that comes in that says, no, I'm right no matter what. And so it really is about stepping back and saying, you know what, maybe you are right. Maybe I need to just take a step back, take a breather, and realize that you have a good point. So it's accepting the partner's influence, dialogue about the problems, and then practicing self-soothing. I mentioned that when it comes to the child. And so as parents, we have to be able to model that to them. It's like, okay, I need a breather. I'm sitting back. I'm taking some deep breaths. Let's do that together. I feel like we're overworked as a family. We just had an argument. Let's take a step back and try to soothe ourselves. And so essentially, of course, it's working on the marriage, but there are times when, the conflict is just too high, and it's so essential to get help before it's too late. Gottman talks about how the average couple waits 6 years before seeking help for marital problems. And I see it in my office, subhanAllah, is that when couples come in and I ask them, we discuss about their issue, their problem, what they're facing, and I ask them, when did this problem start? When did you have these issues? It's always in the years. It's always in, okay, this has been going on for 2 years. This has been going on for a couple of years. And so many couples, subhanAllah, to tell me, okay, this has been going on since we got married 10, 11, 16, 22 years ago. And so it really is essential to recognize when the conflict is getting too much, especially in looking at the children and seeing the impact that it'll have on them and reaching out for help. Half of all marriages that end, they do so in the first 7 years. So if you look at the 6 years and 7 years statistic, it means that the average couple lives with unhappiness for far too long and waits too long to get the help. So it's so essential that we know about this and we don't become one of those couples, that we know that when we're having issues, when there are problems out there, that we reach out, because our deen encourages it. Islam encourages therapy, reaching out for help. The Prophet ﷺ was the greatest therapist in that he didn't have just one answer for somebody's question, but he would pay attention to their psychology. He would pay attention to who they were, what their temperaments were, and then he would counsel them. So it's so essential to get rid of the stigma that we have against therapy and reach out because we know the detrimental effects that it will have on us as a couple. And then the couple relationship going back to being the foundation of the family, and the family being the foundation of society. So all of these are building blocks, and the couple is the foundation. This is the bottom. Couples have to be rock solid. And so when we are not, and when we see that there's a problem, it's for us to fix the cracks before everything tumbles down. And that includes the children and their mental well-being, their physical well-being, their social well-being. We want them to thrive. We want them to be able to have the proper tools to go out into society and to face the world. to be, to contribute to society, to be positive in themselves, to be to know that they have that ability to succeed. And so when we are giving them this environment of conflict and hostility, where it's really about just survival, even emotional survival, they won't be able to be given that safe place to launch into the world. So we want to be able to make sure that we are working on our marriages so that they are strong and they're providing that safe, beautiful, comfortable space for children to thrive. And so this ends the presentation, and I'll just leave it here on this last page. I do recommend these 3 books. There are many, Islamic books on marriages and things as well, but these are particular ones that I have found helpful myself, as well as for my couples and my families, and particularly the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work from Gottman, as well as The Secrets of Happy Families. It was a great, interesting, fun read, and it gives you a lot of tips on how to help make things better in the family. If you'd like to contact me, this is my cell phone number. You can send me a text. You can, give me a phone call. And my email address is there as well, info@saadiayunus.com. And you can reach me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, inshallah. I hope this was beneficial. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us all to realize and recognize when there are issues, when we need to reach out for help. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala strengthen our marriages and our children to be the best that they can be in society, so that we can all work our way towards Jannah, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.